We're down with the last subdivision of poetry, which is the dramatic poetry. Okay, so dramatic poetry is a combination of the lyrical poetry and of the narrative poetry. But of course, to make things better and in order for the audience to relate more, okay, and to actually to devise a new form of expressing poetic works. So dramatic poetry is invented. So of course, with its etymology, it comes from the Greek word dran, which means to do or to act. So the story is being acted out. So there are a lot of exaggerated gestures. Of course, the quality of the voice should be considered in doing this kind of activity. Okay, so it shows eventful period of people's lives in serious, it could be in serious or in a humorous way. So speech and action recreate the flow of human life on stage. So of course in dramatic poetry you cannot really show everything just like in movies. So most of the time it only takes a fragment of what happened to the life of the characters that are present in the dramatic play. Okay, so of course traditionally we have two kinds of dramatic poetry. One is the tragedy, and the other one is the comedy. So of course tragedy is a drama in which heroic protagonist meets an unhappy or calamitous end, brought by some fatal flaw of character or by circumstances outside of his or her control, or simply by destiny. Okay, so when we say tragedy, it does not automatically mean that the character will die at the end of the story. It's not really about dying. Tragedy is more on suffering. Okay, well, if you remember in most uh, films or local dramas, the enemy would rather make the main character or the hero suffer instead of killing that person directly. So of course the antagonist would want to do or to kill, okay, the character little by little or through an eventual process, okay, not to directly take the life of the character, because of course suffering is a guilt pleasure, okay, for those characters who have an opposing or contradictory objective in life. So for tragedy, we may of course categorize it into two. So it could be, well, actually, it could be a pure tragedy, it could be a tragic comedy, or a melodrama. Okay, so what's the difference between tragic comedy? But of course, the meaning of the tragedy is in its definition itself. But of course, to add some comical effect. Okay, so tragedy also incorporate comedy in order to lift the spirit of the audience after being dragged in the depth of their uh, somehow loneliness by sympathizing or empathizing with the character in the story or in the play. And then with melodrama, it's like a series of unfortunate events. I mean, I'm not referring to the story itself. Okay, so it's more like a continuous and consistent, okay, um, series of events that are not too tragic, but not too easy to handle as well. Okay, that's for melodrama. So it includes a lot of crying as well, shouting, a lot of blaming, a lot of not so good memories to start with. Okay, so according to Aristotle, there are six essential elements of a tragedy, and the most important of them is actually the plot. So without a fixed, logical, and organized plot, then the story won't be as satisfactory as it would be. Okay, so everything should be connected with each other. The twist, the revelation, the realization, it should all be connected. After all, it is the plot that could actually bring suffering to the character. Okay, so according to Aristotle, tragedy should include peripetia. Is my spelling correct? Peripetia. I think it's yeah, this is actually a Greek word. That's why. Okay, so peripetia or peripetia rather. Peripetia. Yeah. So that is actually the reversal of events plus, where's the plus? Anagnosis, or the recognition, or let's say realization, equals Marcia, or the suffering, or that is actually the tragic effect. So what is that peripetia and that anagnorisis? Okay, so in the tragic story, let's just use a simple example. So in most local drama or in most local TV programs, okay, so the story would always start with these two two characters who have different status in life. So one is rich, one is poor. So the main character is born poor, poorest of the poor, and then the antagonist is fortunately born as a wealthy person or a wealthy individual. Okay, someone who has a silver spoon in his mouth. Okay, but of course, as fate brought them together, they have a lot of encounters. So they actually form. They're not actually in good terms. The protagonist and antagonist, but it so happened that things things turn into something that both of them never expected. So the antagonist, who was once a rich individual, becomes poor, and then of course the former status of, or I mean the previous status of the protagonist becomes the opposite. Okay, so meaning to say the protagonist becomes rich. Okay, so that would be now the peripetia or the reversal of events. Okay, and then, or maybe it could be, let's make things closer. Okay, so the antagonist and the protagonist, okay, had this uh, had this argument, and of course as they argue, they become very violent and physical. So the antagonist always carries this knife, or always carries um, uh, an instrument that could actually somehow kill someone. Okay, so it could be through a form of a knife, or of a stick, or whatever that the antagonist could use to actually weaken the his or her opponent physically. So of course, the protagonist is in disadvantage. So he is the underdog, since he doesn't have anything to use as weapon. Okay, and the antagonist, by all circumstances, have all the advantages in his side. So they punch each other, they drag each other down on the floor, they actually uh, hurt each other for how many, for almost an hour, until such time that uh, the antagonist tripped. Okay, and then he unfortunately, uh, I mean, the knife was withdrawn from the hand of the antagonist, and since favorably by, maybe there is an interference of the god or the goddess in the story. Okay, so the knife actually was being thrown close to the protagonist. Okay, and this time the protagonist get hold of the knife once used by the antagonist. So the peripety there is now the situation. So the situation is now in favor of the protagonist. So how are we going to insert anagnosis? So they continued fighting, and until such time that, of course, the protagonist was able to kill, though the protagonist does not mean to actually do it. Okay, so he or she killed the antagonist, and then after some time, help came. That's the normal thing in Philippine, I mean in local film. Kung kailan late na saka darating yung mga ambulansya, yung mga police or whatever. Okay? So a person, an individual, maybe close to the protagonist, an investigator or whatever that person is, okay, approach the protagonist, surprised by what happened, by what he or she witnessed, the antagonist lying down on the floor, dead. Okay, and of course that character, the newly arrived character, does not know how to actually say this important news to the protagonist. And the agnosis came there as the protagonist realized, as mentioned by the new character, okay, who just arrived, that the antagonist is the long lost long lost sibling of the protagonist. Of course, the protagonist, though he or she is not in good terms with the antagonist or with the enemy, it doesn't erase the fact that they are related by blood. Okay, that the antagonist is his or her sibling. Okay, so of course hamartia or suffering would arise in the personal struggle of the character of the main protagonist. So the tragedy there is the suffering experienced by the main character as he tries to as he or she tries to blame himself or herself, and at the same time tries to forgive himself or herself for what he or she did, okay, with antagonist or with his or her sibling. Okay, so that's why in a story, in a dramatic poetry, plot is really important because everything should be connected with each other. Okay, so at the beginning of the story, it may not make sense, but then of course as the drama go along, as the story propels, everything will uh, will be unified and will be connected to each other. So character, the main character should be a flawed hero who is of course not perfect. Unlike with the normal story that you read, the normal film that you read, most of them are actually perfect. They are good looking, they are rich, they are good in academics. They they're almost, I mean, there is no imperfection in them. You could say that they are the perfect or the ideal man for you, the ideal woman for you. But of course, in a dramatic poetry, it is not. Okay, a character should always have this um, distinct flaw in his or in herself. Okay, and that could be the main or the major reason that could cause his or her suffering. And then the thought here, okay, is only the circumstances or the events, okay, that is being uh, related or incorporated in the plot. And then the diction, there should be a careful use of words, Okay, so if the characters are someone who are from the cream of the crop, or someone who's uh from the high, I mean someone who has this, what's the term for that, um status, yeah, status in life. Let's say someone who is a prince or a princess, or a son or a daughter of an influential person. Definitely the words used by these characters should also fit with the status or with the disposition that they have in life. Okay, and then the music, of course, music um energizes. Music adds spice to the um to the drama or to the play itself. Okay, but of course in dramatic poetry, just like with narrative poetry, it also encapsulates the muses and chorus or the choruses. Okay, so they are actually the most of the time, muses and chorus or choruses are actually the narrator, especially when the characters are in break. So meaning to say when they are resting or when there are nobody on the stage. The muses, the muse or the chorus or the choruses take the stage and try to narrate what is happening at the back of the stage. Okay, so it's like a short break for the characters in order to give way to this muse or chorus that is also essential to the dramatic poetry or to the dramatic play. And then there is a spectacle. Well, a spectacle is, in short, these are just the paraphernalia, or it of course tries to control the mood. Okay, because of the wardrobe, because of the background, because of the musical accompaniment that is incorporated in the dramatic poem or in the play itself. And then we have here comedy. So comedy depicts humorous incidents in which protagonists are faced with moderate difficulties but overcome them, and the play ends happily. Okay, so of course the play would always end happily. So if in tragedy it tries to show how life is difficult, comedy tries to somehow lift the spirit of those audience who felt down watching the tragic play. So it tries to uh, give something that could brighten up their day through their satiric or farce play. So what's the difference between satire and farce? Actually, they both meant to to bring laughter to the audience. It so happened that satire is a way more serious compared to farce, because in satire there is a purpose, there is an objective, and that is to ridicule, that is to show how a person, how the government, how the society, okay, are treating others badly. Okay, but of course in satire it does not directly show, okay, the the abhorrent, okay, the abhorrent things that are happening within the community. Okay, unlike with farce, where farce is a total absurdity, because, well, the in farce it's more like it tries to make fun of the thing that we normally witness in our surrounding. But of course, through this um, comedic presentation, what is actually not good becomes somehow okay. let's try to have this example for you to understand things better. Okay, so I'll just switch my screen from uh, from my lesson to YouTube. Okay, so okay. All right. So the next one would also be a sample from Bubblegum. Actually, what you witness and what you're about to witness are not actually um, a form of dramatic poetry. Okay, so this is actually a gag show, but for the sake of performing, okay, and also for the sake of showing what is farce and uh, what is satire. So I would like to show you this one. Wait. Where is it? Wait. Ah, okay. So Bubblegum, the Believed Millionaires. All right. So going back to uh, what I mentioned, of course, farce and farce and satire are both imitation, definitely, of what is really happening in real life. Okay, but it so happened that it adds some comedic effect to uh, to make things lighter. But of course, in satire, in one way or another, it tries to directly attack a person. It could be a government or the society itself, our group, okay, who are doing misdeed or who are doing things different to what they are intended to actually do or perform. Okay, so let's say in the two examples in Bubblegum, the satire there is actually the latter part, which is the billionaires in Believe. Okay, of course, the audience are, aside from being informed of what is really happening in the Bilibid, it tries to show in a comical way that those prisoners who are in this Bilibid are not actually prisoners in the true sense of the word, because they still enjoy the luxury, the wealth that they have outside the cell or outside the prison, okay, where they are, I mean, outside the jail where they are actually in. So it only means that there should be an action to address such problem. It should be resolved. And if you are watching a lot of news, in Bilibid prison, there are a lot, well, some prisoners, well-known prisoners, especially those drug lords, okay, still have a lot of gadgets. They were able to recreate a pool. They have this male, I mean, they have this, they have their sex slave, okay? So there are a lot of things that are being subtly or subtly discussed in a satire play. While in farce, it is only a totally uh, a pure entertainment to make someone laugh. Although it also make use of the flaw or the imperfection of a person, just like with Cecilio Susuma. So actually, his difficulty in speaking, and somehow in that example, it is being normalized that, or it is being romanticized that those people who have speech difficulty could be that funny. Okay, actually, he is not funny. What's funny is the way we see his problem. Okay, for him, it's only normal for him to talk with all the tinong tititihin, because we know that the word is actually sinong sisisihin. Okay, but of course in farce, it's more like evoking laugh in a way that the main reason why you're laughing is actually absurd. Okay, now if you are watching scary movie, you would know what farce is. Okay, so that's all for poetry, and then tomorrow I'll be uploading the video for prose. So good night, thank you so much.